Hello and welcome to Idiotsplaining, the podcast where I explain things in a way that probably makes you dumber, but in a much more fun way than school ever did. Today we're diving into a topic that confuses a lot of people, especially if you're American. College in the UK, or as they like to call it, uni. Why use a word when you can just shorten it, right? Before we get into the nitty gritty, strap in and get ready for a wild ride through history, hilarity, and probably some terrible advice about attending college across the pond. Now, when you think of college in the UK, most people are thinking of universities, but fun fact, the word college can mean something a bit different. Universities are for degrees and advanced stuff, but colleges also refer to places where you can go after high school but before university, if that makes sense. It's like a buffer zone when you're too young for the real world but old enough to be unsupervised. Think of it as academic purgatory. Anyway, the whole thing started back in the 12th century with Oxford University. No big deal, just the oldest university in the English-speaking world. And it wasn't started because a bunch of scholars got together and thought, hey, let's make a prestigious school. No, it was because the students at the University of Paris were expelled for being rowdy. So the birth of higher education in the UK started because of expelled troublemakers. How's that for irony? Cambridge popped up a little later, probably because people at Oxford were getting a bit too snooty. And some guy thought, we can make a better school. And the rivalry has continued ever since. Honestly though, how much rivalry could you have when both schools look like they're straight out of a Harry Potter set? I'm pretty sure their biggest argument is over who has the oldest stonework or the fanciest library. The UK education system expanded from there, though it took centuries because it became more than just a playground for rich dudes. By the 19th century, universities like Edinburgh and Manchester were opening up, which were more focused on science and engineering. You know, useful things. It wasn't all Latin poetry and jousting by then. And now, well, college in the UK has become a staple for people all over the world. Whether it's for academic prestige or just the chance to drink in pubs that are older than the US, thousands flock to the UK for the university experience. Alright, so you've decided you want to experience college in the UK. Maybe you've watched The Crown too many times and fancied yourself an intellectual who can hang in a place where people say whilst instead of while. Well, here's what you can expect. First off, the application process. In the US, you've got the SATs, personal essays, letter of recommendation, and a million other hoops to jump through. In the UK, UCAS. One form, just one. Don't let that fool you though. They've got some pretty hardcore requirements. You better have your grades on point, and depending on the course, you'll want a whole list of subjects you've studied because over there you specialise early. You're not going to be dabbling in English lit whilst majoring in chemistry, so pick your lane. Then there's the term structure. Instead of semesters, they've got terms, usually 3 of them. And they're short but intense. You'll get lectures, seminars and tutorials. Tutorials are basically where they put you in a room with a professor and a few students and ask, do you know what you're talking about? It's terrifying, but hey, you want the authentic experience. Fun fact, a lot of universities in the UK are city-based, so instead of an enclosed campus with quads and dorms, you're living in the city, perhaps in some ancient building and pretending like you're living in Sherlock Holmes's flat. This is both cool and terrifying, because you will, without a doubt, get lost every single day for at least the first term. Oh, there's a ton of reading, by the way. Do you think you've done a lot of reading? Well, you haven't. In the UK, they give you a reading list that's a mile long. Half the books are probably written in the 1600s, and don't worry, no one reads it all anyway. Just learn to nod wisely when someone mentions some sort of author, and you'll be fine. Perhaps the biggest shock to the system is no grades. You get tested at the end and that's about it. Yeah, good luck with that. Right then, more aspects for UK college life or university life. The hilarious ones. First up, Freshers Week. Love Freshers Week, by the way. Imagine this, thousands of 18-year-olds fresh out of their parents' houses, left to roam free on the streets of university towns, armed with nothing but a student ID and an overwhelming desire to find themselves through drinking copious amounts of cheap alcohol. Basically, a long week carnival, but with more questionable decisions and a lot of people trying to reinvent themselves as deep because they read one quote. I once heard about this guy who turned up to this Freshers Week dressed in a full tuxedo because he thought freshers meant fresh start, wanted to be the most sophisticated in the room. He was the most sophisticated person to get puked on his lap by the end of the night, that's for sure. Student accommodations next, and let me tell you, if you haven't lived in a student flat with questionable mould growth and one bathroom for 6 people, you haven't lived. For some reason, there's always that one person who thinks they're a chef and will proceed to cook the most horrifying combinations of foods at 3 o'clock in the morning. Ever smelt burnt ramen mixed with tuna fish? Welcome to university! And let's not forget societies. In the UK, university societies range from the mundane, football, chess, debate club, to the downright bizarre, like Quidditch teams. These are fully grown adults running around with broomsticks between their legs. Yes, it's real. People take it very seriously as well, so I'm not going to go too far into it. If you want to join a club, you can spend an entire year doing nothing but taster sessions. There's always a society for everything. Of course, no university experience would be complete without the occasional lecture hall disaster. There's always that one person who falls asleep during the lecture, wakes up to the world's loudest snore. Or someone who looks like they're trying to take notes but is actually scrolling through their Instagram reels until their phone volume goes off mid-cat video. Priceless. The biggest college prank though, don't get me started on the ancient traditions some of these universities have. One in Cambridge, there's this thing where students sneak a car into the roof of the building every few years. No one knows how they do it. It's Hogwarts for pranksters. Right, some of the annoyances about these, okay? Firstly, the weather. You can never truly understand what it means like to study in the UK until you try to get a lecture in the pouring rain while dodging puddles that could swallow your shoes whole. The worst part of this, people just pretend like it's normal. They're like, oh, it's just a bit of rain. Meanwhile, you're soaked to the bone and wondering if you'll ever feel warmth again. Then there's the whole queuing thing. The British do love their queues, I will say. You'll spend more time standing in line at the student union or waiting for the bathroom than actually attending classes. It's like their national sport. Don't even think about cutting in line. That's a capital offence. Another pet peeve? Politeness. I know it sounds nice, but after the 15th sorry for absolutely no reason, you'll start to wonder if anyone knows what they're apologising for. Dropping a pen? Sorry. Sat down next to someone in a lecture hall? Oh, sorry. Breathed too loudly? Sorry. It's like being in an alternate universe where everyone's a step away from a nervous breakdown. Then again, it is university. Let's not forget about the food. I'm not here to bash the entire British culinary tradition, but if you've ever been to a student cafeteria and seen the grey mush they call curry, you'll know what I'm talking about. Beans for breakfast as well? Good luck. Oh, don't forget the jacket potato either. That's traditional, that one. Now, library culture is another thing that will drive you absolutely mad. You'll go into the library expecting peace and quiet. What do you get? Someone chewing loudly on crisps. Or worse, someone with a mechanical keyboard. A phone call in the silent study section. Truly a place in purgatory for that person. Finally, what about paying 800 quid for a room that could double as a cupboard? Welcome to London, if you're going to university in London. The rent situation is so bad that some students have taken to living on boats because it's cheaper than renting. You heard me. Boats. Now, I know I've talked about bad things about college life in the UK, so let me go through the pros and cons. Firstly, the pros. The quality is top notch. You've got some of the best universities in the world with world-renowned professors, facilities and resources. If you want to get your money's worth, you can learn a lot, especially if you're into research and specialization. Plus, you'll leave with a degree that has global recognition, unless you do film, TV and radio studies like I did. Another pro, the social life. The pub culture in the UK is an experience in itself. Imagine studying hard all day, then grabbing a pint with your mates in a 300-year-old pub. You don't get that in America. And then the societies. We talked about this a little bit earlier. Whether you're into sport, debates, or that Quidditch thing, there's something for everyone. One of the biggest perks is that UK degrees are actually shorter than US degrees. Most bachelor degrees are 3 years and not 4. If you're in Scotland, it's 4. But for the most part, you're done quicker. There's a whole extra year of your life back. Now, yes, I'm going to have to talk about the cons. Some of these I've already talked about, like the weather. Like, imagine waking up for a 9 a.m. lecture in January. It's pitch black outside. It's like you're living in Game of Thrones. The rent prices, don't get me started. No, seriously, don't get me started. I'm an adult. I'm like 29. I didn't really do the whole full university thing. I don't even want to know. Another con, if you're an international student, are the fees. British and EU students typically get more affordable rates, but if you're coming from outside the EU, you'll be paying through the nose. If Brexit's taught us anything, it's that the EU students might not even last. Lastly, the pressure. With so much of your grade depending on a final exam or paper, the stress can be overwhelming. You don't get a bunch of small assignments to help you build your grade. What are we talking about here? You get one shot, mess it up, and you've just bombed an entire year of work. So no pressure then. Alright then, my favourite part of the whole episode is the Q&A section. What's the weirdest tradition you've heard? Well, too many to count here. But there's one that stands out, is the trashing tradition at Oxford. When students finish their final exams, they get covered in champagne, flour, confetti, you name it. It's like a chaotic, messy celebration of freedom. Of course, then you have to clean yourself up and act like a responsible scholar again. So, swings and roundabouts. Is it true British people drink tea all the time at university? Well, yes and no. What they don't tell you is it's just an excuse to take a break from studying. I know, right? You're like, yes, let's have a cup of tea, when really it's a way of avoiding doing more reading. And to be fair with you, I'm more of a coffee person. Do British students go to class, or is it American TV when no one ever seems to study? To be honest, this depends. Diligent students attend every lecture, but you'll also see plenty of people rocking up to the final exams having not attended a single class. The university is all about finding that balance between getting the degree and pretending you've worked hard. And finally, do people live on boats to save on rent? What, you thought I was lying earlier? No, they do. In places like London, people get creative. Living on a canal boat is cheaper, but I know it's not all smooth sailing. And yes, the pun was intended. Right, that is that, and well, to be honest, that's it for the back to school specials. I'll be back next week for the bonus episode, but until then, you can catch me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, you name it, I'll be on it. At Ross Hoare, that's Ross and Hoare. The music of this podcast was provided by Streambeats and Kevin MacLeod, of course, of Incompetech. This is an independent podcast, and yes, I am the only person on this podcast. The creator, the mixer, I literally do everything. So if you like it, be sure to subscribe. Also, we'll be getting back to normal episodes in a couple of weeks, so if you've got any topics that you would like me to discuss on this podcast, then make sure you get them in. rosshoare.com, that's where you'll go to. Thank you for listening to this podcast. If you've enjoyed, please subscribe or follow, and also get your mates to do the same thing, and I'll see you next time.